It's 3 in the morning and you're doing the thing again. You open your banking app not because anything changed since you checked it 4 hours ago, but because your brain needs to confirm the number is still there. And it is. It's sitting there. Maybe it's 12,000. Maybe it's 19. Maybe you've been grinding for 2 years and you're finally closing in on 25. And you should feel good about this. You should feel proud. But instead, there's this low level hum of anxiety that you can't quite name. Like you're doing everything right and it still doesn't feel like enough. Like you're saving and investing and saying no to things you actually want, and yet the finish line keeps moving. Here's what I need you to understand right now, before we go any further. That feeling isn't a sign you're failing. That feeling is actually a sign you're close to something, a specific threshold where the entire experience of having money changes, where your savings stop being a safety net and start being an engine, where the rules of the game you've been playing finally flip in your favor. That number is $50,000, and what happens on the other side of it is something most personal finance channels never bother to explain properly. My name is Sig, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, the psychology behind wealth building, and why some people seem to cross financial finish lines while others grind for years and stay stuck in the same place. If you want to understand the real mechanics of what actually changes at each level of savings, not the theory, not the highlight reel, the actual psychology and math of what shifts when you hit certain numbers, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up changing how you think about your savings. We've already talked on this channel about what changes at $10,000. We've talked about the shift at 20,000. But 50,000 is a completely different category, and most people who reach it don't even realize what they've unlocked. That ends today. Here's the assumption most people make. They think $50,000 is just $20,000 with an extra 30 grand on top. Same game, bigger scoreboard. And that assumption is completely wrong. When you have 10,000 saved, you've escaped the panic zone. One car repair doesn't ruin your month anymore. When you hit 20,000, you've built what I call walking away power. You can quit a bad job. You can say no to something toxic. You can negotiate from a position of actual strength instead of pure desperation. But $50,000 is the first time your money stops just protecting you from what goes wrong and starts actively building your future, whether you're paying attention or not. At 50,000, your savings are no longer a wall between you and disaster. They are a machine running in the background generating returns, creating options, compounding quietly while you sleep. And that is a fundamentally different relationship with money than anything you've experienced before crossing that line. Before we go any further, I need to give you a number that's going to reframe this entire conversation. According to the most recent Federal Reserve data, the median American savings account holds less than $8,000, not 80,000. Not 18,000, 8,000. That means the majority of people in this country, no, we're near the 20,000 milestone we talked about in our last video, alone 50. Only about 29% of American households have $50,000 or more in liquid savings outside of retirement accounts. Let me say that differently. When you cross $50,000 in savings, you are in a different financial category than roughly 7 out of every 10 people around you. Your coworker who seems to have it together, your neighbor with the new truck in the driveway, your friend who just booked a trip to Europe. Statistically, most of them have not crossed this line, and understanding what that actually means for your life is more significant than you probably realize right now. Let's talk about the math first, because this is where it gets genuinely exciting, and I want you to actually feel the difference between these numbers. When you have $10,000 invested at 8% annually, that's $800 a year your money earns without you doing anything. Nice, not life-changing. When you have 20,000 at that same 8%, you're looking at $1,600 a year in returns. Still not dramatic. But when you cross 50,000 invested at 8% annually, you are now generating $4,000 every single year without lifting a single finger. Think about what $4,000 actually means in your real life. That's a car payment for most of the year, covered by your money while you sleep. That's a full emergency expense absorbed without touching your budget. That's a month of rent in most American cities, paid by your portfolio and not by your job. And here's the part people don't sit with long enough. That $4,000 doesn't disappear. It gets added back into your balance. So next year, you're earning 8% on 54,000, then on 58,320, then on 62,985. The number compounds on itself with zero additional effort from you. Getting to your first 50,000 is the grind. Getting to your second 50,000 is noticeably faster. Getting to your third, your money is doing more work than you are. This is what people mean when they say their money works harder than they do. It's not a metaphor. It is literally arithmetic, working in your favor. Now, here's the part I really need you to sit with, because this is the shift that changes everything and almost. Nobody in personal finance talks about it directly. When you have less than 20,000 saved, your brain is still operating in what psychologists call a scarcity mindset. Even if you're not broke, even if you're technically stable and paying your bills, the underlying operating system of your financial decision making is still built on fear. Fear that it won't be enough. Fear that one bad month wipes you back to zero. Fear that you're always one unexpected expense away from starting over. And that fear is invisible, but it controls everything. It controls what jobs you accept, what risks you take, what opportunities you say yes to, and which ones you quietly walk away from because you feel like you can't afford to gamble. But something documented repeatedly in behavioral economics research happens right around the $50,000 mark. Your brain shifts from what researchers call the scarcity orientation into an abundance orientation. You stop filtering every single decision through the question of can I afford to lose this, and you start asking what is the best use of this resource. That is a completely different question. And the people who ask the second question instead of the first consistently make better financial decisions, better career decisions, and better life decisions across every category. Not because they got smarter, because the number in their account changed the operating system their brain was running on. Let me show you what this actually looks like in real life, because abstract psychology only gets you so far. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 34 years old. He makes $68,000 a year working in operations at a mid-sized company. For the last 3 years, Marcus has been grinding quietly. Brown bag lunches every day. Used car that runs fine. No vacations. Watching every dollar leave his account with the discipline of someone who genuinely believes the future version of himself is worth protecting. Last month, Marcus crossed 50,000 in savings, and then his boss called him into a meeting. The team is being restructured. His role might be eliminated. 6 months ago, Marcus would have walked out of that meeting in a cold sweat. He would have spent the next 2 weeks saying yes to everything, not pushing back on anything, walking on eggshells, because he needed that paycheck more than he needed his dignity. But Marcus walked out of that meeting calm, not reckless, not arrogant, genuinely calm, because he knew he had at least 12 to 18 months of runway. He knew he could job search properly instead of panic applying to the first thing that appeared on Indeed at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. He knew his negotiating position was real because his financial position was real. So, when the restructuring conversation came back around, Marcus negotiated. He asked for a retention package. He got one, not because he was smarter or luckier than he was 6 months ago, because $50,000 in savings gave him the psychological ground to stand on that he never had before. Here's something else that changes at 50,000 that almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most practically valuable shift of all. You start seeing opportunities that were always there but completely inaccessible to you before. Not because the opportunities are new, because you now have the resources to actually act on them. Your colleague mentions a rental property in your city that needs some work but could generate $600 a month in cash flow. Before 50,000, you scroll past it. After 50,000, you can actually run the numbers and consider putting 15,000 toward a down payment without gutting your entire financial foundation. A certification program comes up that could bump your salary by 12,000 a year but costs 3,000 upfront. Before 50,000, That 3,000 feels like a risk you can't take. After 50,000, it's an obvious investment with a 4-month payback period. A friend is starting a legitimate business and looking for a small investor to help get it off the ground. Before 50,000, you wish them luck and mean it. After 50,000, you have the option to participate in something that could change your financial trajectory. I'm not saying you should throw your savings at every opportunity that shows up, but there is a massive difference between having real options and having none at all. And 50,000 is the specific threshold where real actionable options start appearing in your life. Instead of staying theoretical, here's something that will probably surprise you about how your relationship with daily spending changes once you cross 50,000. Most people assume that having more money saved makes you more relaxed about spending money on small things, more willing to grab the coffee, buy the nice dinner, upgrade the whatever, and to some extent that's true. You stop doing the mental math at the grocery store. You stop agonizing over whether the name brand cereal is worth the extra $1.50. But here's what actually happens that nobody tells you. Once you have 50,000 saved, you start caring way less about small expenses and way more about big ones. You stop sweating the coffee and you start paying very close attention to the car payment, the lease, the rent increase, the subscription you signed up for 18 months ago that you completely forgot about. When your financial foundation is real, you stop wasting mental energy on decisions that don't move the needle and you start applying serious scrutiny to the decisions that do. And that shift in attention is worth thousands of dollars over time. Not because you become a miser who never enjoys anything, but because you become intentional about where real money goes instead of exhausting yourself over amounts that were never going to make or break you anyway. Now I need to warn you about something because this is where a lot of people destroy the momentum they spent years building, and I've watched it happen more times than I can count. When you hit 50,000 for the first time, a very convincing voice shows up. You've earned it, it says. You've been disciplined. You've been sacrificing. You've been saying no for years. Why not say yes for once? Why not finally get the car you've been wanting? Why not take the big trip? Why not upgrade the apartment? And look, I'm not saying you should never enjoy your money. That's not the point of building wealth. Suffering through your 30s so you can theoretically be comfortable at 65 is not a financial strategy I would recommend to anyone. But here's what that voice is not telling you. That $50,000 is not a reward for good behavior. It is the foundation of your entire financial future. The difference between someone who crosses 50,000 and keeps building and someone who crosses it and resets is not income. It's not luck. It's what they did in the weeks and months immediately after crossing that threshold. The person who stayed the course crossed into territory where money compounds fast enough to genuinely change the trajectory of the rest of their life. The person who celebrated with a car payment basically handed back the key to that territory. And here's the math, so this isn't abstract. A $600 monthly car payment doesn't just cost you $600 a month. At 8% compounding over 10 years, that same $600 invested monthly becomes over $110,000. You are not buying a car. You are trading $110,000 of future wealth for a machine that will be worth $8,000 in a decade. That is not a trade most people would consciously make, but they make it anyway because they're thinking about the monthly payment and not the opportunity cost. Here's something that separates the people who cross 50,000 and keep building from the people who cross it and slide back. And it's not what most people expect. It's not budgeting skills. It's not investment knowledge. It's not income level. It's identity. The people who keep building past 50,000 have quietly made a shift in how they see themselves that's hard to explain until you experience it. They no longer think of themselves as someone trying to save money. They think of themselves as someone who builds wealth. And that sounds like a subtle distinction, but it changes everything about how you make decisions on a Tuesday afternoon when temptation shows up. When you're someone who saves money, you make exceptions. You negotiate with yourself. You say, I've been good all month, I deserve this. When you're someone who builds wealth, you ask a different question. You ask, is this consistent with who I am? The identity question is much harder to argue your way around than the willpower question. And it's the reason that for certain people crossing 50,000, the last time they ever worrying about money the way they used to. Not because life gets easy, because their relationship with money permanently changed and it doesn't change back. Let me show you some numbers that I think are going to genuinely change how you see the next decade of your financial life. If you're sitting at 50,000 right now and you continue investing $1,000 a month at an 8% annual return, here is your actual timeline. You hit 100,000 in approximately 4 years. You hit 250,000 in approximately 10 years. You hit 500,000 in approximately 16 years. You hit $1 million in approximately 22 years. Now compare that to someone starting from zero doing the exact same $1,000 a month at the exact same return. They hit 100,000 in about 6 years. They hit 250,000 in about 13 years. They hit 500,000 in about 20 years. They hit $1 million in about 28 years. 6 years faster to $1 million. Not because the person with 50,000 is smarter, not because they earn more, not because they have access to some secret investment strategy that regular people can't use, just because they already crossed the threshold where compounding starts doing real work, and that gap gets bigger the longer the timeline stretches. $50,000 today, handled correctly, is one of the most powerful financial positions a regular person can occupy. Not because it's a lot of money in the moment, because of what it mathematically becomes over time if you leave it alone and keep adding to it. Here's something wealthy people understand about money that almost nobody else does. And it's something you start to feel viscerally once you cross 50,000. Money is not just a number, it's stored time. Every dollar in your savings account represents time you already worked and chose not to spend. And every dollar your money earns in returns represents time you didn't have to work at all. When you have $5,000 saved and you earn 8%, that's $400 of time you got back for free. When you have $50,000 saved and you earn 8%, that's $4,000 of time returned to you annually. That $4,000 is hours you will never have to sell again to cover that amount of ground. At 100,000, it's $8,000 of time returned per year. At 250,000, it's $20,000 of time per year flowing back into your life without you doing anything for it. This is why people with real wealth start to seem less stressed about work over time. It's not that their jobs got easier. It's that an increasing percentage of their financial needs are being covered by money that works independently of their labor. And the earlier you cross 50,000 and start building, the sooner you start getting real chunks of your time back. That is what financial freedom actually means in practice. Not a beach in retirement. Time returned to you now, in your actual life, in increasing amounts, the longer you stay the course. Let me make this practical for a second, because data without action is just expensive trivia. If you're not at 50,000 yet, here is the honest truth about what gets you there. It's not a hot stock tip. It's not a side hustle that magically generates passive income while you sleep. It's two things done consistently over time. Spend less than you earn and automate the difference into accounts that grow. That's it. That's the entire strategy. The reason it feels insufficient is that our brains are wired to find complex solutions to complex problems. But this particular problem has a simple solution that just requires patience and repetition. Every month you contribute to your investment accounts, you are buying a slightly larger engine for your future. Every month you don't, you're delaying the point where that engine becomes powerful enough to matter. The math does not care about your feelings or your intentions. It only responds to what you actually do. And the people who reach 50,000 are almost never the highest earners in their social circle. They're almost always the most consistent, the most boring about it, the most willing to let time do the work that hustle and cleverness can never fully replace. So here's where I'll leave you. If you're below 50,000 right now, every single dollar you add to that number today is worth more than any dollar you'll save later. Not in a vague motivational way, In a literal mathematical compounding way, the money you put in during your late 20s and 30s has the longest runway to work with. The habits you build right now, the ones that will either make you genuinely wealthy or keep you financially stressed for the next 20 years. There's no version of this where you look back at 35 and wish you had saved less in your 20s. There is absolutely a version where you look back and wish you had started earlier, stayed more consistent, and resisted the voice that told you that you deserve to reset your progress. And if you're already past 50,000, if you're sitting on that number or close to it right now, I need you to hear this clearly. Don't touch it. Don't let the voice convince you that you've earned a celebration that costs you your momentum. You haven't earned a reset. You've earned an engine. And an engine that's finally running at the right speed is the most valuable thing you own right now. Protect it like your future depends on it, because the future version of you, the one who either retires comfortably or works until they physically can't, is being decided by the choices the current version of you makes in the next 12 months. $50,000 won't make you rich overnight, but it will permanently change your relationship with money, with risk, with opportunity, and with the future you're building. Start building. Stay building. The math does the rest.